You thought we were gone? Think again. The legends, the mysteries, the mind-blowing history. Because we're just getting started. New videos, new stories, coming soon. This short hook builds hype fast. Let me know if you want a different vibe. A deep rumbling sound fills the air. The screen fades from black to reveal a desolate wasteland. Charred buildings, empty streets, and the sky filled with rolling clouds of ash, August 6, 1945. The people of Hiroshima woke up to a day like any other. Children walked to school, shopkeepers opened their stores, and workers filled the streets. They had no idea that in mere moments the city would vanish in a blinding flash. Then it happened. Suddenly the screen is engulfed in pure white light. Silence. Then a deafening explosion. The city is erased in an instant. Buildings crumble, bodies vaporize, and a massive mushroom cloud rises into the sky. To understand how we got here, we must go back to a time before the bomb existed, before humanity unlocked a power so great it threatened our very survival. Fade to 1938, a dimly lit laboratory in Berlin, Germany. Two scientists, Otto Hahn and Fritz Strassmann, lean over bubbling experiment. It all began with a discovery. Deep within the atom lay a secret, the ability to release unimaginable energy. Otto Hahn and Fritz Strassmann had just split the nucleus of a uranium atom, unleashing a force unlike anything ever seen before. The camera zooms into the microscopic world of the atom. A single nucleus splits, sending a chain reaction of energy outward. This was nuclear fission, and in that moment the key to ultimate destruction was found. Word of this discovery spread quickly. Scientists knew that in the wrong hands it could become a weapon of untold devastation. In 1939, two men, Albert Einstein and Leo Szilard, wrote a letter to US President Franklin D. Roosevelt, warning him that Nazi Germany might be developing an atomic bomb. The United States could not afford to take that risk. And so, with a single decision, the race to build the deadliest weapon in history had begun. The Manhattan Project, one of the most secretive operations in history, was born. Thousands of scientists, engineers, and military personnel worked in absolute secrecy to unlock the power of the atom. At its helm was J. Robert Oppenheimer, a brilliant physicist who would come to be known as the father of the atomic bomb. But even he did not fully grasp the horror he was about to unleash. In Los Alamos, New Mexico, the world's greatest minds labored day and night. They split atoms, refined deadly materials, and assembled a weapon capable of reshaping history. The first test was approaching, and once the genie was out of the bottle, there would be no turning back. Before nuclear fire consumed entire cities, it first burned the sands of New Mexico. At exactly 5:29 a.m., the first atomic bomb, codenamed Gadget, was detonated in the desert. The explosion was brighter than the sun. The fireball stretched miles wide, the very air ignited, and those who witnessed it were forever changed. The bomb had worked. But at what cost? The war raged on. The United States had a choice: invade Japan and risk millions of lives, or use the bomb. The decision was made. August 6, 1945. The Enola Gay takes off. Inside, the crew is silent. They have no idea they are about to unleash hell. The target, Hiroshima. At 8:15 a.m., Little Boy was released. 43 seconds later, the world changed forever. Massive explosion. Slow motion as the mushroom cloud engulfs the city. 80,000 people, gone in an instant. The survivors were left burned, their skin peeling, their lives shattered. 3 days later, Nagasaki suffered the same fate. Another 70,000 lives lost. The war ended. But the nightmare had just begun. The bomb did not bring peace, it brought fear. The Cold War saw an arms race unlike any in history. Nations stockpiled thousands of nuclear weapons, each one more powerful than the last. Show missile launches, world leaders in tense negotiations. At its peak, the world held over 70,000 nuclear warheads, enough to destroy humanity several times over. And even today, the threat remains. Cut to modern-day nuclear tests, footage of protests, world leaders debating. Today, over 12,000 nuclear warheads still exist. One miscalculation, one mistake, and history could repeat itself. Final scene, a dark background, a single clock hand ticking closer to midnight. The atomic bomb ended a war, but it also created a world of fear. Was it humanity's greatest achievement or its greatest mistake? Tell us what you think in the comments. The screen fades in from black. The ruins of Hiroshima and Nagasaki stretch endlessly. The camera pans over charred remains of buildings, shadows burn onto walls, and survivors wandering in silence. When the dust settled, the world was forever changed. Over 200,000 people were dead, and many more would suffer from the radiation for decades. States. The war was over, but humanity had opened a door it could never close. Cut to the Enola Gay crew returning to base, silent, their faces unreadable. The men who dropped the bomb were hailed as heroes, but some would later wrestle with the weight of their actions. "My God," one crew member whispered, "what have we done?" A slow montage, Japanese civilians searching for missing loved ones, hospitals overflowing with burned victims, the first signs of radiation sickness appearing. Cut to a woman holding a child, both covered in burns, staring blankly ahead. For those who survived the blast, a new horror began, one that couldn't be seen or touched: radiation poisoning. Show footage of doctors examining victims, hair falling out in clumps, skin covered in sores. Days after the explosion, strange symptoms appeared: high fevers, vomiting, skin that fell apart at the slightest touch. People who had seemed unhurt collapsed and died days, weeks, even years later. Cut to scientists puzzled over the long-term effects of radiation. No one had ever seen anything like this before. The bomb had done more than kill, it had poisoned the very air. The water, the land itself. Show a time-lapse of Hiroshima rebuilding, but with hospitals full of leukemia patients. For decades, survivors, known as hibakusha, suffered from cancer, genetic mutations, and social rejection. The scars of the bomb lasted longer than the war itself. Cut to 1949, the Soviet Union. Scientists huddle around a metal sphere. A countdown begins. But while Japan struggled to recover, the rest of the world was preparing for something even worse. The United States no longer held the monopoly on nuclear weapons. On August 29, 1949, the Soviet Union detonated its first atomic bomb. The nuclear arms race had begun. Show footage of American generals reacting to the news, fear and tension rising. The world had just entered a terrifying new era, where war could mean extinction. The US and the USSR rushed to build bigger, deadlier bombs. The hydrogen bomb was born, 1,000 times more powerful than the one dropped on Hiroshima. Cut to a massive explosion in the Pacific Ocean. The screen shakes from the force. Entire islands were vaporized in nuclear tests. The ocean itself boiled. And yet, neither side dared to use these weapons. Instead, they lived in constant fear. Cut to school children hiding under desks. A black and white instructional video plays duck and cover. By the 1950s, nuclear war wasn't just a possibility, it was an expectation. Children were taught how to survive a nuclear attack. Cities built underground bunkers. The world waited for the inevitable. Show the Cuban Missile Crisis, US and Soviet ships facing off, Kennedy and Khrushchev intense discussions. Then, in 1962, the world came closer to annihilation than ever before. The Cuban Missile Crisis. Soviet nuclear missiles stationed just 90 miles from US shores. One wrong move and millions would die. Show nuclear launch codes being prepared, then fade to Kennedy and Khrushchev making a deal. For 13 days, the world held its breath, but at the last moment a deal was struck. The missiles were removed, nuclear war was avoided this time. Cut to the Berlin Wall falling, Cold War ending, crowds celebrate. In 1991, the Cold War ended. The Soviet Union collapsed. For a moment, it seemed like the nuclear nightmare was over. Cut to modern footage. North Korea testing missiles, Iran's nuclear program, military parades in Russia. But the bombs never went away. Today, over 12,000 nuclear warheads remain, enough to wipe out humanity many times over. And new countries have joined the nuclear club. Show Kim Jong-un watching a missile launch, then fade to maps of nuclear-armed nations. Now, more than ever, the world stands on the edge of disaster. One wrong step, and the fire could return. Cut to the doomsday clock ticking closer to midnight. Scientists warn that we are closer to nuclear war than ever before. The doomsday clock, a symbol of how near we are to catastrophe, now sits at just 90 seconds to midnight, the closest in history. Show footage of world leaders discussing nuclear disarmament. Some nations push for disarmament, others build more bombs. The question remains, will we learn from our past, or are we doomed to repeat it? Show a young child staring at a bomb museum exhibit, touching a piece of Hiroshima's ruins. The invention that annihilated millions still exists today. The fate of humanity may depend on whether we choose peace or destruction. The screen fades to black. A final message appears. What do you think? Should nuclear weapons be abolished? Comment below. This is our story, but how it ends is still up to us. Outro music slow fade out. In 1945, a single invention wiped out over 200,000 people in an instant, and it still threatens us today. Cut to black and white footage of Hiroshima before the blast. People walking, children playing. The people of Hiroshima never saw it coming. One moment, life was normal. The next, a sudden blinding white flash engulfs the screen. Everything was gone. Quick cuts. A mushroom cloud rising, charred ruins, a child covered in burns staring blankly ahead. But the worst part, that was just the beginning. Cut to 1949, Soviet scientists building their own bomb. Fast forward to Cold War nuclear tests, Cuban Missile Crisis, modern missile launches. Today, over 12,000 nuclear warheads still exist. One wrong move, and history could repeat itself. Cut to a close-up of a doomsday clock ticking closer to midnight. We've been lucky so far, but tell me, how long do you think our luck will last? Final scene, a black screen. A single red countdown timer appears, ticking down from 10, 9, 8, before cutting to black at 1. Tick, tock,